Welcome to another edition of the Food Systems Podcast, brought to you by the Forum for the Future of Agriculture. I'm your host, Mark Titterington, and today I'm joined by a great friend and colleague, Aidan Connolly, President and Chief Executive, I think, of AgriTech Capital. But in the context of today's discussion, the author of a fabulous new book, The Future of Agriculture, which certainly chimes with our mission, of course, at the Forum. Aidan, a very warm welcome to you. Thanks for taking the time to join us.
Very, very excited to draw swords with you again. We had the chance to talk in Chicago, and then subsequently you invited me to the meeting in Washington at the Senate building. I'm expecting a very exciting conversation, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, those were two good runouts, and I've got no doubt today will be the same. I wonder, I mean, you know, your experience and history in this world goes back a long way. But I'm just interested in what inspired you? What was the motivating factor to write the book in the first place?
About, I suppose, 5 years ago, I started to write blogs on issues that I thought were important, and clearly digital is about as important as any other subject out there, maybe the most important subject, and also one which generally people haven't written that much about. So my first blog that I wrote on LinkedIn was called 8 Digital Technologies Transforming Agriculture. And that was downloaded, well, since then, 20-something thousand times. So I thought, I didn't even realize there were 20,000 people that could be interested in that subject. And then I wrote subsequently blogs on all of the various species, got into CRISPR, talked about consumer behaviors and reactions to technology, and then the use of technology in the food chain in general. So I always had the idea that having gotten to, at that stage, 46 something, 50 blogs, wouldn't it be nice to corral it all into one format and have it all in one place, in one space? And luckily enough, maybe not luckily for him, but an editor that I knew was having a career change. I asked, would he come and help me? I knew what the structure was. I had all the material, 80,000, 100,000 words, and he came and did that. And then subsequently, my wife actually went and did the same thing. She edited the edits. So we had a book, and then it was a question of finding a publisher. The self-publishing option means that it's freely available, so you can download it for free. That's a huge thing, obviously, in places in Africa, Latin America, but equally at universities. So that's where we got to, or that's how I got to where I got to, of launching a book as I have. I haven't found anything else out there like it. The fact of it being a place where, particularly in the ebook, where you've got all the hot links, so you can go and see the companies. And I'm not judging people. I'm not saying this is a good technology, this is a good company, a bad company. Just say, here are technologies I think are changing everything, and here are the people I think you should speak to.
All makes sense. I mean, one of the things that I think have been put to you as you've been around with the book, and we hear a lot of, is the extent to which agriculture may or may not be a laggard in terms of its evolution of innovations, development of innovation and application for it. Do you agree with that contention that agriculture is behind the curve, or is there enough that you're now seeing that gives you confidence that we're actually either at or even in front of the curve?
Oh, I think we are laggard. But you have to take exception to the fact that we are the worst, because according to McKinsey, we're joint worst with hunting. So agriculture and hunting are both the least digitized. Not exactly the camp you want to be in. And I have seen some commentators have said, well, that's not the right lens to look at it at, realizing that technology has underdelivered on farm, that farmers are skeptical because they've had a lot of very bad experiences with technologies. All of these things are true. And it's also true the complexity of farming makes it much harder to apply technology compared to other industries, which are nice, clean buildings, and you're putting, a sensor, a camera, an AI system into something which is relatively controlled. But all in all, farming has a long way to go. And if anything, livestock farming is even further behind than crop farming. But compared to any other business, I think The gaps in what we know, the improvements we can make are huge. There is the potential to make big leaps, but it's also extremely chaotic and complex environment that we're using the technology in.
So, I mean, you've in the book identified a number of areas, from robotics, data analytics, artificial intelligence, blockchain, all which have great potential. I mean, blockchain, we had Steve Statler on here from William a couple of months ago talking about the potential there. I mean, those are a few areas to name, but a few. What do you think are the drivers behind those, and to what extent do you think they can and will have a transformative effect on the agriculture of tomorrow?
But today, the drivers continue to be performance, productivity, profitability. Those three Ps are still the ones that most farmers react to. And possibly, maybe probably, those haven't been sufficient to encourage widespread adoption of technology on the farm. I think the drivers that are accelerating at the moment, labor is a huge one. I think the discussions and the need to measure climate change and the impact that farming or food production has on the environment, maybe even in general, all of the ESG factors are a major driver of adoption. And those two probably are higher on the importance list at this stage than profitability, performance, and productivity. But in the end of the day, those three factors still have to underline most things. If I'm not making money with it, it's hard to, and nobody's paying me for doing the others, then it's hard to keep on going. But that's where I see the drivers. I think labor in absolutely every aspect of farming has been a challenge. We are looking to replace people, make people smarter, allow them to do the jobs differently. And the only way to achieve that truly is through AI, sensors, cameras, technology in general.
I know that you and I have the great pleasure and honor in many places to travel around the world and see different farming systems. Certainly the experience that I had over the summer, we were in Australia, and the labor point that you said there is not just about the efficiency of farm, it's even just the availability of the labor to come onto the farm as a key driver, as you said. So I would certainly agree with you on that. I wonder also whether or not, Aidan, when we talk about measuring productivity, which is, if you say something, one of the Ps, perhaps for some people, even the main P, if we kind of regard that as yield, there's an increasing argument that I hear a lot that actually in the future we're going to measure resilience on the farm. To what extent do you agree with that?
I do think so. And those outside forces, the other actors, the other stakeholders in our business are obviously questioning it to a greater and greater degree. But if I'm a farmer, I'm still saying, I'm going to do all these things for you. Are you going to pay me more for them? And the answer today, frankly, has been no. We go to conferences, as you and I do. I go meet a lot of people in the business to try to keep, like today I'm in Quebec, yesterday's in Texas, to try to keep my hand in what the realities are, be it the milk business, be it the chicken business, be it the crop business, the wine business, the orange juice, whatever business it is. People are saying, I've got this conveyor belt of demands coming from consumers, coming from the food retailers, coming from people involved in the chain saying, can you deliver this? Can you deliver? And nobody's paying me a penny more. And I'm already in a business with tight margins, razor thin margins where some years I make money, some years I don't make money. So this is not this is more akin to a commodity business than it is to a value-added business. And yet I'm being asked for value-added type demands.
I think one of the reflections that we've had, we've just finished, Aidan, a study on what it would take to develop and scale regenerative agriculture, and we can argue about whether that's the right terminology or not. One of the key parts of that is I think you're getting at is how do you fund that transition? How do you fund and enable farmers to make and sustain the transition? That point about sharing value and about somebody paying the farmer beyond what they just produce for the sustainability attributes that go around it is the big open question. And And we found that some in the value chain are prepared to pay that at what price, and whether that covers the farmers' costs is one question. But there are others that are clearly not. I wonder if that comes back as well to the shape of the supply chain that we've got, which is very different to what we see in other markets. Do you think that is a real driver for us as we consider how we do get more money into the farmer pocket for the goods and services that they provide?
Yeah, clearly, we have to reinvent the ways in which we think about the food chain and where the value is being shared. And the one farmer said to me they'd been approached by a food retailer who had approached them with a win-win scenario. And I said, "Oh, that sounds very exciting." And he said, "Yeah, it's a win for them and it's a win for them." In other words, win-win means two wins for them, not one win for them. That awful phrase that you hear a lot on American farms of how can I be green when I'm in the red, when I'm not
Right.
making money on my farm. I think we have to be more realistic about how to share that, and clearly, what the fear from the food retailer, or maybe even from the consumer, is we're going to pay more for this, but are they actually going to change? How do I know the changes? So you say you're going to retain more carbon in your soils. You say that you're going to use less water. You say you're going to meet our requirements for traceability and transparency. Will you actually do that? Or are you just going to simply charge me more for my food, but not deliver any of those things that I think, from my standards, my ethics, my expectations, my aspiration for what I'd like to be putting in my mouth? Are you going to actually change anything? And that's the skepticism that's come maybe over the years from their side, which is fair as well. But I think there are actors in the middle. We don't have to name them, but you look at the initiatives of the Nestlés and the Unilevers, and in various businesses, they very clearly taken a position of saying, this is what we want to do. This is the right thing to do. This is good for the planet and it's good for all of us. And we're going to, so more of that has to continue to happen, and perhaps not just as a individual basis or individual company basis or individual brand basis, but starting to see it being done by everybody in the food chain.
Yeah, I mean, it's a topic in and of itself, and I think we could probably build an entire podcast just around that totally. Piece and the different dynamics that are in the agri-food value chain.
You've thought a lot about this already, so I'm wading into your territory as much as mine. But there we go.
Yeah, well, we'll get onto that, no doubt, in future episodes. Let me bring you back to the book. I mean, you're very careful not to say that you're picking winners, but you do pick out a number of areas that you clearly think, whether it is robotics, blockchain, AI, and the rest, that you think will have that transformative effect. When you look a bit deeper into that, both for the book and what you see around the world and where you visit, what is really exciting you? What are the technologies that are coming to the fore in each of those areas that you think are going to have the biggest impact? If I can ask you to put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah, I think it depends on different countries. If I think you're asking about the nature of what I'm seeing and what countries are doing what, always impressed by Israel, just because so many entrepreneurs, so many great ideas coming out of it. I recently went to Brazil. Brazil has traditionally produced a lot of ag techs, startups, and innovators. The nature of that innovation has changed, in my perspective. Going there a few weeks ago, we launched the book in Portuguese. Seeing the business, let's call it 4 years later from my last visit, maybe it's not quite 4, but pre-COVID, I saw a lot more technology focused on climate, a lot more focused on transparency on the farm. And this, of course, is probably occasioned by the fact that consumers, particularly in Europe, are asking a lot of questions about where food is produced in Brazil, how it's produced, and their demands go well beyond whether the food is cheap or not. They're into a lot more sophisticated and detailed understandings of the provenance of that of those I call them commodities or foods. China, obviously, having been there probably now 7 weeks ago, challenged by the economy's downturn, challenged by the fact that a lot of technology in China is increasingly staying in China and not able to be exported. But that said, mother necessity of innovation, necessity being the mother of innovation. I think that I really was quite impressed by some of the technologies around energy on the farm, trying to find ways to be more efficient in the use of electricity, when to turn machines on, when to turn machines off, not to have coolers, not to have ventilators, not to have soakers, as you know, for spraying water on cows when there are no cows in that particular part of the barn. Small changes, incremental, but you could see globally how those technologies could have massive impact. United States continues to grow. It feels like we have the so-called Gartner hype cycle of where things get hyped and then they collapse, and then we come to some sort of and I think AI continues to grow. It feels like the ChatGPT in particular was a whole excitement about what this could do to change everything overnight. And now we've maybe again settled into, if not the valley of disappointment, we're certainly getting close to maybe more realities around what it could do or what it can't do. But those types of technologies I see, I would say, climate technologies, energy efficient technologies, and continuing growth in the application of AI to make jobs smarter.
And just maybe a word on blockchain, because it was something that we touched on earlier in the year on one of these episodes, I said, with Stephen Statler. Do you think that can play a role? Can it play a role? It should be able to play a role in unlocking perhaps one of the great conundrums of the agriculture supply chain being what it is, transparency. Do you think it has a role to play there?
Mark, you and I know each other relatively well at this stage, and you know that I'm not good at not being direct. So I'm very disappointed in blockchain.
Yeah.
I think that the sourcing, resourcing of it has diminished tremendously in the last 12 months. I think the Maersk experience, you know, approaching it or pursuing it for a couple of years and then seemingly dropping that as initiative is a bucket of cold water over the whole concept. Now, that said, the concept and the technology of a blockchain-like technology still has to come, because it solves a lot of problems in the food business about how do you create transparency without necessarily giving away all the secrets of who does what at various stages or points in the chain. And that's something which is fundamentally critical for us in our business. Maybe it should or shouldn't be, but the food business, again, on those razor thin margins, requires different actors to do different things at different stages without necessarily being discoverable, because then somebody will come in and cut them out of the system and take those margins away. But blockchain, for me, it's not going to make it the way it's going at the moment. So but whether that has changed in 6 months, in my view, my opinion has certainly changed the last 12 months. But I fear that we're definitely, we don't have the trajectory that we need to see that being implemented fully across the food chain.
Yeah, makes sense, Aidan. And as I say, there's something that you said there, back to this point about what I do think increasingly is a very unique structure of our supply chains in food and agriculture, which are very different to other sectors. Let me just try and kind of come out a little bit from the detail and take us up a level or so. I mean, we talk about, certainly in Europe, a lot of talk over the last 3 or 4 months of how do you create a more sustainable, resilient food and ag system that is nature positive, climate smart. I mean, all the words that we can get in there, we're talking about. What do you think is getting in the way of achieving that? I suppose in a way, what I'm trying to say is, what's getting in the way of helping food and agriculture to be all things to all people, which is what people seem to want it to be?
I'm not sure that there is anything getting in the way of that happening. I think it is happening. I think there's a lot of detailed thought going into how do we make food production a carbon sink? How do we reduce and mitigate the production of methane or methane, depending on which version of English you speak?
Yeah.
How do we get greater recycling of ingredients? How do we scale using insect meal or again, energy production from waste? And I think all those things are being pursued at a great rate of knots. I think the speed of innovation has been tremendous. Clearly, having markets that value what you do and being able to be paid for these in the form of credits or otherwise, is essential. And the capitalist system, for all of its flaws, continues to prove itself to be one of the most efficient ways of getting money from the hands of one person to another and pay for these externalities that we're imposing on the system. I'm more skeptical, and whether we want to go down this rabbit hole or not. You and I've had a discussion about the scope 3. What does that mean? How is that measured? How do we capture that? It gets quite hairy to do so in today's environment with metrics which are not as clear cut as they need to be. But yeah, I'm not at all negative on, to the contrary of the discussion we just had on blockchain. I'm very, very positive on climate change mitigation, on technologies and approaches that we're taking. Maybe people want it all to happen overnight, but it's taken us 10,000 years to get here in terms of food production. What makes us imagine that we're going to pivot the whole system in 10 months towards a climate-friendly, zero carbon emissions. These things can't happen all in one go.
Yeah, for sure. Well, look, let me tap into that famous Aidan optimism and ask you, as we are based in Europe, I mean, we're a global forum, but we are based in Europe, to bring this to a close, what advice would you have for us here in Europe, whether you're a political leader or a corporate leader, that we can do, or you'd like to see Europe do more of, to help transform this system along the trajectory that we've been talking about today?
Well, as a European and as a passport holder from the EU, and as somebody who, as you said, is optimistic, so the level of innovation in Europe is tremendous, but the level of scaling of those innovations is disappointing. If I look at France, if I look at my own country, Ireland, if I look at the Netherlands, if I look at Germany, loads and loads of companies with great ideas. We've got to learn how to scale them better and to facilitate that scaling. I think that Europe has taken a leading position in terms of climate. It needs to now take a leading position in terms of climate technology. Not simply saying there is a problem, but saying what it needs to do to support that problem. Some of that support can come from governments. Sometimes I feel the best role for government, be it at EU level or at country level, is simply to remove barriers to the adoption of technology. There's a dairy show on this week in the US. I met a farmer who had a relatively large farm by European standards, but who had to go out of business because his farm in the US context wasn't large enough. And I said, what if you were counseling yourself 10 years ago, what would you have advised yourself to do? And he said, I would have advised myself to innovate faster, to embrace change faster, to get things done faster. And that would be my recommendation to European agriculture. Don't wait. Don't let somebody else do it. Don't look for the technology to come from someplace else or the solutions to come from someplace else. The speed of innovation will be the determining factor as to whether Europe continues to produce its own food or whether it imports from somebody else.
Makes sense. Aidan, it's been tremendous to talk to you. Always an energizing discussion, full of insights, as well as recommendations, and also caution where needed. Pleasure, as always, to have you on the show. And I do recommend to all that are listening, Aidan's book, The Future of Agriculture. You should be able to click on the icon that will accompany this podcast. It is well worth reading. And as you say, being in digital format, very easy to read and find the place that you're most interested in. Aidan, thanks so much indeed for joining us.
Mark, my pleasure.
You've been listening to another edition of the Food Systems Podcast, brought to you by the Forum for the Future of Agriculture. Join us again next time.